Welcome nerds to more Resto Shaman goodness! We received a request from you guys as well as from one of our Patreons for the DPS build, which is very sought after at the very high end of PvE. So today you'll be learning about the talents, gear, rotation, tips and tricks and everything you need for your Resto Shaman DPS style for raids and dungeons. So let's kick it off with the talents. When it comes to talents, there's only one talent that actually complements any form of DPS output. The rest is what you would want and need for raiding and Mythic Plus in general. On the first row, we have the only variation when it comes to the content we do. For raiding, we take Unleash Life, which is my personal favorite, simply because we get an extra button to press. And pairing this up with an Empowered Chain Heal will empower it even more, giving you massive AoE heals. For Mythic Plus scenarios, use Undulation. You want Undulation because in dungeons you'll be the only healer, and apart from chain heals that heals only 3 targets, you won't have on-demand burst AoE heals, meaning you will want to simply be casting a heal every time somebody starts to dip low. This matters especially for wicks with bursting, quaking, and any mechanic that damages all 5 of you at the same time. The second row is the row where we get our so-called DPS talent. Echo of the Elements is the name of the game. This bad boy gives us 2 charges of Lava Bursts, but also 2 charges of Riptide and Healing Stream, so it's not only a DPS talent. You want this for all types of content. Third row is a utility row, as always. Pick whatever you want, as long as you can take advantage of it. I would recommend Spirit Wolf. Spirit Wolf is a passive 20% damage reduction and move speed that builds up in 4 seconds after you shift it to Ghost Wolf, so it's not instant. But it's really good in situations where you either need mobility or simply have to soak mechanics with nothing to do. Fourth row is technically another utility row. By default, I would recommend Earth Wall Totem. In spread AoE damage situations or soaking situations like the Rastakhan Meteor or the Opulence Soak mechanic, this option is amazing. Not to mention works wonders in Mythics in any AoE damage scenarios. Fifth row is another so-called utility row. The 2 main options here are between Graceful Spirit, which I would recommend as a default, or Nature's Guardian. Graceful Spirit helps in scenarios where you have to move, like annoying Mythic Plus mechanics or raid encounters that always make immobile classes suffer a lot. Nature's Guardian is a good set and forget that will save you every 45 seconds from dipping too low on HP. Sixth row, almost exclusively you take Cloud Burst Totem. One of Resto Shaman's main weakness is AoE healing, or at least reliable AoE healing. Cloud Burst complements that. It's a more difficult talent to utilize properly on this row than most of the other options, but if you can work it well, it will actually work wonders. Last row, take High Tide for all scenarios. This makes your chain heal a powerhouse, and when you pair it up with Unleash Life, it acts as a mini heal cooldown for 3 people. Ascendance is an alternative option if you don't like chain healing. This video has the main goal of focusing on the DPS aspect of the spec, while at the same time going just a bit more in depth about the inner workings of Resto Shaman. If you have anything additionally to add that I might have missed, hit us in the comment section down below. As such, if you want to start DPSing, you need to understand why you should DPS and when you should DPS. You should DPS if your group doesn't require that much healing, and indeed there are parts when everybody's full HP. This means that your group is competent in not taking unnecessary damage. You'll find this difficult to do with pugs, or simply people who don't really care that you can add to the overall DPS on the boss. The other reason you would want to DPS is if your group really needs a bit more damage to take the boss down before another phase of mechanics happens. In dungeons, clearly this can help in tyrannical weeks if you can avoid another set of boss mechanics. In raids, you will essentially become a shitty DPS with strong healing cooldowns. Your damage won't compare to that of the other DPS, obviously, but it's so far the highest out of all the other healers. This situation will occur if your party or raid leader specifically asks for it. You should never engage in prioritizing DPS with groups who are not aware that this is what you will be doing. When it comes to stats, you never want to skew too much into one direction, and overall it's not as straightforward as for a DPS. The general priority of stats is intellect at the top, always, followed by crit, then versatility, finishing up with haste and mastery. Depending on how you want to perform, you can build your Resto Shaman in different ways. So let's take a closer look at what stats actually mean. Intellect, or eye level, is simple. It's raw healing power, and in this case raw DPS power. Nothing too complicated here. Crit is a bit different. Besides the obvious effects of crits, we also have a passive called Resurgence. Resurgence lets us recover some mana on successful crits, with each spell having a different mana return rate. Having more mana to work with gives us more options in using stronger spells to heal that are less mana efficient. At the same time, gives us more options to DPS. Note that the mana return only comes from healing spells and not from DPS spells, meaning that if you want to focus on DPSing as your main objective, crit has less value to you since lava bursts will always crit if the target has flame shock on it. Also, flame shock is the most expensive damage spell, so keep in mind if you plan on using it in AoE situations. Our mastery, deep healing, gives our heals more bang when our target is low. It's not very smart to save up on heals and wait for the tank to dip before topping. Instead, it means we are good in tough situations since our heals are more efficient, which is why mastery is valued lower than other stats. Not to mention that so many healer cooldowns, even our own, are designed to save people from dying, meaning that in tough situations you won't be directly healing as much, reducing the effectiveness of mastery. Haste is not a bad stat, but since we are not a hot class like a Resto Druid, even though Riptide has a hot component, it's not as good for us. It doesn't mean it's a bad stat. It still reduces the cast time of our spells, meaning we can fit more spells in a tighter window, but the way Resto works, as I mentioned with the previous passives, we want stronger on-demand heals that can crit to give us mana back. When it comes to trinkets, even with a focus on DPS, we will still be getting healing trinkets. The best one so far, and seemingly for all time, is the Alchemy Stone, for which you need to be an alchemist and craft it yourself, because professions. This one is good for both raids and dungeons. The other trinkets you can aim for to swap around are a bit easier to obtain, if RNG is with you, meaning you better start working on the alchemy profession, eh? Crest of Paku from the Conclave and Ignition Mage's Fuse from Tol the Gore are very good options, especially for raiding, but not exclusively. Conch of Dark Whispers from Shrine of the Storm is a more popular choice for dungeons because it's simply a no bullshit trinket with a crit buff, meaning it will always be good. Now let's move on to Azurite traits, and this is where you will see new things. For our lovely DPS build, you want 3 Igneous Potential traits. They work better for Resto since it raises the proc chance of Lava Surge to 23%, as well as buffing the damage of Lava Burst. Lava Surge is a passive we share with Elemental. When Flame Shock deals damage, it has a chance to make our Lava Burst instant and reset its cooldown, or charge if you're running Echo of the Elements for our talent. This is what will give us our main damage source. For the other 3 slots, you will have to make a choice. Do you want more focus on damage outputs or healing? For more damage, go for traits like Treacherous Covenant, Natural Harmony, Synapse Shock, and really any stat giving or damage giving trait will be just fine since they all contribute to both your DPS and healing, although in different ways. Usually raiding is a bit more flexible, and if you're committed to DPSing there, go all out with these traits. But if you want to complement your HPS, especially in Mythics, go for Turn of the Tide, Spouting Spirits, and Overflowing Shores. Specifically for dungeons, I wouldn't recommend skipping on these traits because as the only healer in the group, there won't be anyone else to pick up the slack. In keeping with our theme of doing damage, the rotation is fairly straightforward. Keep Flame Shock on your target and make sure to refresh it always. Cast Lava Burst as often as you have them. Fill in with Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt actually costs no mana, by the way, so feel free to spam it. AoE is a bit trickier because it will tax your mana more, so how much you will focus on this is up to you. As far as the rotation goes, keep Flame Shock on up to 3 targets and use Lava Burst on the priority target, filling with Chain Lightning. And that's it. Congratulations, you have mastered the Resto Shaman DPS rotation. The rotation is simple, but what happens outside of it is something you need to be aware of. When you go for DPS, like I mentioned earlier, you will turn into the shitty DPS of the group with healer cooldowns. You will still need to use the cooldowns properly, and this is something you should be talking with the other healers. In dungeons this clearly does not apply, but here you will have healing traits that will complement you. But if some healing is called for, it's good to know how to efficiently squeeze in extra heals. Tidal Waves, our last passive, can clearly summarize our rotation. You want as much as possible to cast Chain Heal or Riptide before casting Healing Waves and Healing Surges. If you will start a window of healing, pop a Cloudburst totem down since you won't be using it in the DPS windows, as well as making sure Healing Rain is on the group taking the damage. One more thing you will want, normally on all healers though, but especially for the ones that you can use to dish out some extra damage. And that thing is macros. There are add-ons out there that can do this for you, but personally I like making my own macros since I feel they are more reliable. Use the mouse over macros for all your heals that need to target a person, and you can change the name of the spells for whatever you wish. The macro is show tooltip for the name of the spell, and then /cast, target equals mouse over, and then the name of the spell. This way you can keep throwing lava bursts and healing your target without alt-tabbing, giving you faster reaction times. For spells that you need to place down, like totems or healing rain, use the @mouse_cursor macro, which is show tooltip and the name of the spell, /cast, @cursor, and then the name of the spell. For these, you need to have a bit of the feel for how large the AoE is, so you can catch all that you want to catch in. These help me a lot in reacting faster as well. As always, use the consumables based on the stats you want to focus on. As a default, you want crit enchants on your rings and crit gems in your sockets for the reasons we discussed earlier. Your weapon should have the Deadly Navigation enchant, again for those sweet crit procs. Remember, crit is mainly used for our healing spells, so if you have the choice and possibility, spend your time with the buffs on you by healing your group, and after that go back to DPS. For food, the feast is always good because intellect is our best stat, but if not available, eat the honey glazed haunches for the crit buff instead. Get the intellect flask and battle potion, but also have potions of replenishment. As a healer, you want to make sure you are stocked on good consumables, and if you are also DPSing, you can treat the battle potion the same way you would treat it for a pure DPS spec. The DPS spec for Resto is requested by a lot of groups simply because of the Ignis potential trait that makes Resto the hardest hitting healer. In future patches, if we lose this trait, chances are we are back to being a regular healer once again, so keep this in mind. If you enjoy healing but not with all this DPS madness, check our Resto Shaman Pure Healing Guide that's still out, it's still fresh and has a lot of great information for you. As always, we thank our patrons for their continuous support, and an honorable mention to Ark, one of our top tier patrons who personally requested this guide to come out sooner. If you want to join our patrons this way, there's a link down in the description. Thanks for watching the video and being awesome, and I'll see you next time.